Howdy dowdy, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Unfictional Soundscape. I am your host, Author Man, and today we have a veteran of the unfiction business, Ramsay Wood, executive producer and CEO at Rogue Beacon. Ramsay has been hard at work on one of the hottest ARGs of the year, Pictures of Gwen, and previously got everything rolling with the immersive theater event Boomtown. Check out Pictures of Gwen, get into it before it's gone, you won't regret it, but first, let's get this show on the road. Ramsay, how are you doing today, my friend?
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm real good. I'm nursing a bit of a hangover today. It was my 40th birthday yesterday, and my very good friend Sheila Mio bought me a lovely bottle of whiskey. So I'm nursing a little bit of a hangover, but very much looking forward to chatting with you today.
It's my pleasure to be chatting with you, and happy late birthday, my friend. Make sure everybody in the audience, you wish Ramsay a happy late birthday if you haven't already. It's a beautiful day outside, by the way, everybody. I'm in a studio recording this now. I have a fancy new microphone. I have a fancy new audio interface, and everything's going A-OK. This is how we're going to be recording things from now on, so you can look forward to that and this clear audio fidelity. So, Ramsay, today I'm going to start everything by asking you about probably your most prominent project. Before working with Boomtown, where did you get your experience with coding, and what brought you to the immersive theater scene? Was Boomtown the first immersive theater thing you had ever done?
So it's weird, sort of yes and no. Absolutely, Boomtown was the first time I was able to pay my rent by working in this field, if that made sense.
Yeah, totally.
But I almost feel like all my life I've kind of been involved in this stuff. I think I was really lucky to kind of grow up in that kind of golden age of interactive fiction. In that I was lucky that I was able to access a computer quite early on in my childhood, which may sound weird for our kind of younger listeners, but certainly for my generation, it was I was one of the first people I knew that had a computer. And I was really inspired by text adventure games, and then later, point and click adventures, to the extent that I have very early memories of being in primary school, so what you guys would call elementary school, and I remember kind of sitting around with friends, and we'd kind of make up these games. And I guess in a way we were kind of role playing. It was kind of Dungeons and Dragons, but we didn't kind of know that. We weren't using any kind of formal system, but it would be, Phil's come up with a game, and okay, we're all going to kind of sit around at lunch, and okay, you're in a tavern and there's an orc. What do you want to do? And we were all really inspired by the kind of choose your own adventure books and the fighting fantasy stuff, like Ian Livingstone's, I'm assuming you know what I'm talking about there. And so I feel like very early, interactive fiction was just a really big kind of thing in my life. And then simultaneously, I was kind of messing around with code when I was kind of very young. And then, you kind of get into that stage where you're kind of in your 11, 12, 13, and you start getting into like Games Workshop and Warhammer, and I started really kind of getting into tabletop fantasy and tabletop role playing. As you get a little bit older, I got into things like World of Darkness and Vampire the Masquerade. And then when I left school, I went and did a degree in interactive art.
Okay.
And that was really interesting. Obviously, it was 20 years ago, so we're talking, it was kind of primitive, a lot of the tech that we were playing with, but we were playing with a lot of stuff that is kind of mainstream in kind of theme parks and high-end escape rooms. So, video targeting, projection mapping, kind of sensors, motion tracking, a lot of that kind of stuff we were playing with. And it was at that course that I kind of really got enamored with web development. And that's where I kind of first started, that's where I learned web development. And after I kind of finished university, I worked for several years in web development as kind of both a developer and a designer. And then about 4 years ago, I started working with Boomtown. And initially, I was kind of working, I guess, almost like as like a prop designer, if that makes sense. So for members of the listening audience that are unfamiliar with Boomtown, so Boomtown is kind of a fictional city, and there's about sort of 30 locations within this kind of fictional city that there is, we have kind of immersive experiences. We have kind of actors that are kind of set up to do things. So, for example, there's like an in-world police department, and you might get arrested by the in-world police department. And if you get arrested, you're going to get taken to the police station, and you'll get taken into an interrogation room or whatever. And if you were to open the drawer, in that room, there'd be documents in there. So that's kind of what I did. Is I kind of designed a lot of the documentation and the kind of the items that you'd find around the world. So yeah, I mean, it's like a similar thing would be something like Resident Evil, or the Arkham Asylum games, where you go around and you kind of find pages from a diary or something like that. Would kind of be a similar kind of a relationship. So that's how I kind of got in with Boomtown, was initially doing that. And then the following year, I kind of came back and started working a lot more with the kind of core team that were behind all the theatrics. So you got Doug Francisco and Martin Coate, who really kind of pioneered this stuff. And so I started working more directly with them, and this was the first year that we started introducing more kind of a combination of digital and real world elements. So, for example, like I was saying before, we have these documents that you could find, and then in the second year, we introduced an app where you could scan these documents, and so it kind of acted as almost like an inventory. Almost, it kind of sent you to different locations, gave you kind of little clues that you would need to kind of find these documents, and then by collecting all of them, you could kind of unlock more stuff. And then yeah, I kind of got called back the following year to work on kind of a similar project, and it was at that point that I kind of was feeling quite frustrated in. I felt that there was this huge amount of effort that was being put on by literally hundreds of people, and we have these kind of 30 different immersive experiences with all these different teams working on it, and I felt like so much of the festival audience just wasn't aware of it. And I felt that there was this problem where people would come to the festival, and kind of a couple of days into the festival, they'd be like, wait a minute, I think there might be like a story going on here. And by the time they've kind of got into it, do you know what I mean? It's like it's over.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of really kind of pitching to the guys, what if we kind of extended that, and what if we used a kind of ARG kind of type format, so that we could kind of preload, if that makes sense, so that when
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
audience arrived on site, they already, or at least to a portion of the audience, were already aware of what was going on and what the story was. And we kind of tested that, and that was in 2019. And that went really, really well. And we got kind of great feedback, both from the audience, but also from the performers, that we found that it made things a lot easier for our performers, because the audience had context for what was going on. They didn't have to kind of explain everything every time. And so that was kind of really, really powerful. And then the kind of intention was for 2020 to really kind of go really, really hard with this, and to kind of create basically like a 6-month ARG that led up to the festival, and then kind of culminated at the festival. And then unfortunately the pandemic happened, and that was that, and everything kind of got shut down.
Going back for a second, I wanted to ask two questions. Those experiences that you talked about, where you were in elementary school, or primary school as you call it, where you were kind of role playing and doing and role playing with your friends and doing D&D, but like kind of
Yeah, it's exactly. We were LARPing, but we were 5 and 6 and didn't know we were LARPing. You know what I mean? We had no system. Someone was a GM, but we didn't use those words. We didn't roll dice. We just, you know.
yeah. What would you say that those experiences that you had on the playground were a primary inspiration for Boomtown, or would you say that you garnered your inspiration from somewhere else?
So I would say that with Boomtown directly, that's it was very much Doug and Martin's vision, and so I definitely in the latter years I was involved at kind of a high level, but I wasn't really writing the story, if that makes sense. I obviously had input, but a lot of my kind of role was more realizing their vision. You know, Martin was the director. You know, Doug was essentially involved in the kind of spectacle kind of side of things, and so it was a lot of them kind of saying, "This is the story you want to tell. Work out how to tell it." But definitely, I would say in the way I think about designing games and the way I think about uh, this format, yeah, hugely influenced by my kind of early experiences with video games and the yeah, those kind of childhood make believe, sessions. And then, as I say, being kind of a younger man, more kind of 11, 12, and playing Warhammer, and also just, I guess it's weird. I feel like there was this real rich kind of backstory to everything. So you're playing Street Fighter 2, and it's just Street Fighter 2, right? It's just a fighting game. But you know that Vega killed Chun-Li's father, and that's why she entered the tournament. And I was always kind of really enamored with that kind of stuff. And I think that's been a big influence on or I'd hope is a big influence on the work that I do.
Building off of something else that you had talked about
Mm-hmm.
earlier, where people would arrive at the festival and they wouldn't really be they would they would kind of learn later on, hey, there's a story going on here.
Mm-hmm.
What what were the people doing that didn't know there was a story there? Were they just kind of walking around, and if a character had walked up to them, or an actor, or whatever you'd like to call them, walked up to them and like try to interact with them, would they just be kind of like, "Oh yeah, man, totally." would they not get it?
So one of the things that we did is, for example, we had this phrase, which is "Do I know you, friend?" And that's
Mm-hmm.
everyone's cue. So it would be less a case of someone's going to kind of come up to you and engage you. That may very well be the case, but I guess the kind of kind of archetypical Boomtown interaction would be you're walking through a bit of the city, and you kind of walk through some little alleyway, and there's a guy there, and he might kind of engage you in some way, and you'd say, "Do I know you, friend?" And that's their cue, and that's like, okay, you're a player. And so that it was, in a lot of ways, you kind of had to go and actively seek it out, but it was there. I mean, it's things like, there was all kinds of, just, there's like doors, and you open the door, and there's something behind that door, or there's a payphone, and you pick it up, and someone will talk to you. And so there was all of these kind of things that were just prone and just kind of there, but you almost kind of had to actively walk into it to experience it, as opposed
Okay.
to us kind of grabbing you out of the audience. Because obviously with Boomtown, it's a crazy festival. So they had, I think
Yeah.
last year, I think it was 124 stages.
Okay. That's a lot.
So, and it ranges from everything from, you have kind of 3 or 4 big stages that are your most mainstream kind of acts, right down to these tiny little tents that maybe fit kind of 80 people in there that are just playing the most obscure breakcore or obscure kind of noise music. And so because it's kind of like the setup is that it's a city, it's almost like you're kind of walking into these different house parties, or you're walking into these different clubs kind of spread out all over the city.
Interesting. That sounds. I mean, I'm going to talk about this more later, but
Sure.
Boomtown. I've never been to it, and my knowledge of it is somewhat limited. But and my knowledge on immersive theater in general is somewhat lacking. But I mean, there is, Jesus Christ. From what you tell me and from what I know about it, there is so much that goes into it, man.
Oh, it's incredible. I mean, as I said, all props have to go to Doug and Martin. It's absolutely their vision. But then again, the way it kind of works out is they have this kind of overarching narrative and this overarching idea, and that then each of the venues is pretty much kind of controlled by its own crew. So you might have a crew of, let's say, maybe 20, 30 people, and they control this one venue, and they kind of then, we'll kind of workshop stuff with them, and we'll kind of say, this is the overarching story, this is kind of the kind of bit of the narrative that's taking place in your venue, now do something cool with it. And so there's this huge amount of freedom, and I think that's one of the things that's so great about Boomtown is because there is an audience for it. It's a place where people will really go and make that extra effort, and people will go, okay, I've got this really cool idea for something that I could do at Boomtown, let me pitch it to them. And there's a very good chance that if you've got a good idea, Boomtown are going to be like, yeah, great, we'll give you a venue. What do you need? How big tent you need? What power do you need? If you want to do something cool, you can do something cool. And so it's this kind of this smorgasbord, I guess, of all of these different immersive crews and all these different ideas that then it's kind of vaguely held together with a story, but then it's chaotic fiction, right? And so the audience is interpreting the meaning as much as we're writing it. Do you know what I mean? And a lot of the time the audience will come up with better explanations than we did.
Yeah, that seems like one of the more exciting parts about it is people coming up with their own interpretation and running along with it. I mean, it's a lot like improv. I took improv classes a couple years ago. I was mostly a theater kid before I was a podcast host. Improv was a very enlightening experience, and I really enjoyed it, and they taught a lot, like not to be married to an idea, and to have a setting where you as the actor can interact directly with the audience member is really something special. There's only a few theater productions that I can think of that allow for that kind of thing.
Right. Well, I mean, again, without kind of getting too off on kind of terminology, I feel like one of the better definitions of what is immersive theater that I've heard is literally that it takes place on the same level, so the audience member is existing on the same level as the experience itself. And I definitely think that, yes, certainly in terms of Boomtown, very, very much that there is like I was saying, each venue might have a specific kind of bit of information. Maybe there's some blueprints, for example, in the library, and that ultimately what your ultimate goal here is you need to make sure that the player gets these blueprints. But it's kind of up to you as to how that experience takes place. And if it's really busy, it might be a very quick experience. If your venue's kind of running slow, you might play with this person for 2 hours before giving them the notes.
Wow, 2 hours.
Well, that may be exceptional, but it's that kind of thing. It's
yeah. I'll have to check out Boomtown sometime if I'm ever by the UK.
Yes, hopefully by next year it'll we'll be done with all of this horribleness and back to dancing in the field again.
Fuck yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, Uh, moving a little bit more backward, you had said before that that you've done interviews on things that were not Unfiction. Do you have any projects that you've worked on before that the public doesn't know about, games or websites, etc., anything like that?
So I was going to say, yeah, one of the great example of this, I would say, would be Luke Oram, who is our art director.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He's basically kind of, I'm sure we'll talk more on that in a bit. But yeah, his website, which is lukeoram.com, that was kind of the first thing that the two of us worked on together. And there's actually a hidden kind of game within that website that very few people have found. It's not very long. It takes about maybe 40 minutes or something to play through. But we just, yeah, this is probably the first time I think we've publicly said, oh, by the way, there's a game there. If you go and take a look.
Golly. Oh well, well, hot tip for everybody that's in the audience. Go ahead and check that out, please.
Yeah, that's lukeoram.com.
lukeoram.com. I'll put a link to that in the description, everybody. Awesome. So, we've talked a little bit about your experience with audience members in real life, but do you have any stories that stick out to you, both in a good way and a bad way? Have you ever had like an audience member that was particularly enthused about the whole Boomtown experience, or was there somebody in the audience that was kind of kicking and screaming all the time that they were there?
Definitely there was there is one that comes to my mind at Boomtown where essentially there was I need to kind of give you some kind of context here. So essentially, within the story of Boomtown, there was this kind of evil AI, and this evil AI was essentially gathering people's data, and that was kind of the high concept of what was going on. And we had these Access Amy stores that were set up that were kind of like Apple stores. Would be, I guess, the simplest way. And you could go in there and talk to someone about the AI, and it had this weird kind of culty thing. They basically kind of indoctrinated you and got you to agree to give over more data. And yeah, I do remember one girl came in. I suspect that she may have taken some substances, shall we say, and was very distressed because how could she be so stupid, and she'd given all of her data, and everything was gonna be known about her, and it was gonna appear on all the screens. And we had to be like, this is a game, like it's okay, you're at a festival, this is a game.
Oh shit.
Do you know what I mean?
You had to break character.
Oh yeah.
God.
She was quite distressed. Yeah. We had instances like that, but to be honest, I feel like we've done remarkably well. That there really aren't that many horror stories, and generally, certainly with Pitches to Gwen, and again, even with the online elements of Boomtown, the community's just been wonderful. They've just been somehow the least toxic thing on the internet.
That's beautiful. That's good. Awesome. Have you ever told that story before about the lady?
I'm not sure, but yeah, that was an interesting one.
That's fascinating. That's really funny. I would imagine that you would have had more horror stories like that where somebody comes in.
Right. Yeah, no, to be honest, it's a weird one in that, don't get me wrong, Boomtown, people go and they party and they go hard, but I don't know, it seems like it's responsible, do you know what I mean? And it seems like that there is certainly, I absolutely speaking for myself, and I think I'd speak for anyone that's kind of involved there. We make a real effort on safety. Safety is really, really important, and particularly when you're doing immersive stuff and where you might be physically touching people. You have to be so careful with this stuff, and you need to make sure that you have all the kind of the the things in place to ensure that the player's safety and the player's consent is absolutely number one.
Let's move into talking about Pictures of Gwen for a second.
Uh-huh.
So, what was the boardroom pitch for Pictures of Gwen like? Who in the company suggested the idea first, if anybody? Was it a group effort, or was it more of an individual person who kind of thought, hey, what if we do something like this?
Sure. So I would say it was kind of a group effort.
Mm-hmm.
I think it in a lot of ways it kind of emerged. So for a while we'd kind of really been discussing how could we push the boundaries of this space. And
Uh-huh.
explicitly we were talking about could we had this kind of basic idea of can we subvert things. So for example, so much of this space is horror, right? And we love
Yeah.
that, and we have huge respect for people that are working in this space and that are creating some truly chilling stuff. But we were like,
Mm-hmm.
maybe we could do something that wasn't horror. Like, what would that look
Mm-hmm.
like? And again, I feel like the genre, frankly, it's a genre that tends to murder a lot of women. And
True.
we were like, could we maybe what about we do the opposite of that? Like, maybe
Based.
instead of doing a story where the girl gets murdered, maybe what if we did an ARG about a girl that doesn't die? She actually has quite a pleasant life. And
Based.
what would that look like? And again, it wasn't even trying to like go on a political angle or anything. It was just literally trying to invert things. So like the example that I kind of go to, like my go-to example is, Space Oddity by David Bowie.
Yeah.
So if you play those chords backwards, that's the chord sequence for Killing Moon by Echo and the Bunnymen.
Okay.
And it's kind of that. We were
Interesting.
kind of like, what happens if we play these chords backwards? What does that sound like?
Okay.
So
Okay.
it was
Yeah.
it was that was kind of the crux of it. And then at the same time we were seeing this kind of emergence in like collectibles. So I would
Uh-huh.
say that obviously the most prominent example of that would be like NFTs.
Yeah.
But
Okay. Yeah.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
also just baseball cards and Pokemon cards and anything collectible uh, just seemed to be kind of blowing up. And like I
Mm-hmm.
said, when I kind of first came into Boomtown, that was what I did. Is I was responsible for creating the kind of documents, creating the ephemera, and
Mm-hmm.
I know from my kind of previous experience of working with Luke Oram. So Luke
Mm-hmm.
does a lot of work in like packaging and does a lot of work. He's done like a lot of album covers and a lot of book covers, and I know
Mm-hmm.
from his previous work that he's really really into kind of how would I describe it? Kind of the quality of the artifact, right? That kind of
Okay.
really beautiful gatefold vinyl, and you kind of open it up, and it's all heavy, and it's got
Yeah.
maybe gold leaf embossing on it, and so I knew that if we were working together, we could create some really beautiful, kind of tangible things. And then also we also felt that like this thing, whatever this thing is, let's use the term
Mm-hmm.
unfiction. That's a really great term. That we felt
Yeah.
like unfiction was exploding, and that we
Yeah.
felt that there was so much noise that if we wanted to get heard, we'd have to do something different. And so it wasn't like that we were trying to be reactionary and kind of be, fuck murder mystery. It was just, we knew that if we did murder mystery, then there was so much noise, no one was going to hear it. And so we almost kind of
Mm-hmm.
felt that the only way to stand out was to try and invert things. And like I say, we have no delusions about being original. There is no real
Yeah.
original, but it's like I say, it's okay, let's do that backwards, let's do that upside down, let's take that trope and flip it and see what that looks like.
That is awesome. I didn't know that was the idea behind Pictures of Gwen. That gives kind of a lot of context to how the story has been progressing. I like that a lot. That's a really really good idea. Piggybacking off of that idea of trying to invert things, uh, was the idea of music being an important factor always in the design from the get go for Pictures of Gwen?
Yeah, I mean, 100%, 100%.
Okay.
So I would say that, immersion for me is kind of multisensory, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that
Totally.
definitely, I mean, sound has always been a huge part of the things that I love. And also,
Mm-hmm.
pretty much everyone in the team has a musical background. So, for example, our lead writer, Abby, she's the lead vocalist in a black metal project called Underdark. Luke,
Okay.
as well as being obviously a very talented visual artist, he also plays guitar in a grindcore band called Atomsk. Megan, who's our producer, actually lectures in composition and is also a
Okay.
DJ. Myself and Pasha, we're also both really into music. We make music, and then again with the connection to Boomtown, it means we've kind of in a lot of ways we've kind of worked with ARG in relation to music since we've really been kind of working in this field, so it almost felt natural for that. And then other little things like we did some consultation with a great band called Wallowing, to basically help
Okay.
them produce some unfiction that was related to their album Planet Loss. And
Really?
Luke also produced a comic book that kind of went in tandem with that. So it, almost kind of all the projects that I've worked on tend to have a musical element to them.
I mean, I think, frankly, I think that's how everybody should be doing their projects. They should have a multi-sensory kind of um, immersion or factor to them, because
Yeah, and I feel like audio is it's almost in with all due respect to audio, and I love audio. That's possibly my favorite
yeah,
thing. I almost feel like it's low hanging
mm,
fruit. I feel like it's much easier to add a little bit of background music or add some sound effects than it is to do smell or taste. Do you know what I mean?
I see what you're saying, but I don't know, man. I in my experience, I've seen unfiction at least for unfiction specifically. We have
Uh huh.
either the same kinds of sounds that happen a lot of the time, or we
Uh huh.
have an underabundance or not enough music, at least original music. I mean, uh, I think I can think of a few projects off the top of my head that use licensed
Hmm.
music.
Yeah, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
EMH.
EMH and well, Marble Hornets doesn't do it, but anyway. And for
Hmm.
sounds that we hear a lot of the time, camera glitching is the most obvious thing that comes to mind. I mean, that happens. That is a cliche at this point of how often it happens. But with Pictures of Gwen, one of the main things about it is the original music. I can I
Thank
yeah,
you.
no, man, that's one of the best parts, if not the best part for me
Hmm.
personally. That makes it very very unique outside of just being about not killing a woman straight off the bat.
Hmm. Hmm.
It
I mean, I'm not saying every character is completely
to-
safe, but yeah, we wanted to. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. Yeah,
yeah,
you know what I'm
totally.
saying.
Absolutely. uh Speaking of music, um
Mhm.
why
Uh-huh.
was jungle music specifically chosen for the that one
Okay.
website's mix?
For
Yeah,
Chicken
Chicken
2K.
2K. Thank you very much for reminding me.
Yeah.
Frequent that scene in the UK, the jungle music scene.
Yeah, so again, going back to kind of Boomtown, Boomtown is kind of very much grounded in that drum and bass and jungle kind of scene. In that, I think
Mm.
that for apart from the immersive element, that's kind of what it's known for. And I would
I
actually
see. I
say
see.
that's probably the main thing that it's known for, in that I would say maybe for every one person that goes to Boomtown for the immersive elements, 3 people go for the drum and bass in the jungle.
I
And
see.
so it's very much again, it was just sort of just in the DNA of the company a little bit. I feel
Mm.
like in a lot of ways, like drum and bass has a similar role and a similar kind of place in culture in the UK as hip hop does in the US.
Mm-hmm.
So that it, if you're walking down the street, certainly in Bristol, this is what you hear coming out of windows. It's what you hear coming out of cars as they're driving past. It's kind of what the city sounds like. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and the Chicken 2K itself is literally based on a real kind of chicken shop from my youth. So when I used to live in Wales,
Really?
yeah. So when I used to live in Wales, I'd go out and you go out clubbing, and the clubs all shut really early there. And so
Mm-hmm.
what would happen is you go out clubbing, the clubs would close, and then everyone would go and get food. And there was this kind of real life chicken shop that would just play kind of EDM and just essentially just obnoxiously loud music until silly o'clock in the morning. And you just kind of get these kind of impromptu raves taking place at this chicken shop. And we just thought that was such a great little memory, and wanted to try and kind of incorporate something like that into Torstow. And also
Mm-hmm.
with something like Jungle, it's something that we all know so well that it became easy to kind of pick an iconic selection and kind of say, okay,
Yeah.
this is what a classic Jungle set would sound like.
That's fascinating. That is such a strange sight to me. I mean, in America, um, you don't typically hear hard music unless it's like a bar or something.
Mm-hmm.
A chicken shop having EDM jungle music is like, I don't know. That's like a McDonald's playing Death Grips
Right. Yes.
or
Yes.
or,
It was.
or FX Twin.
Yeah.
It's so strange
Yes.
to me.
Right. I guess that's the thing. Is it was just it's late at night, and I guess it's almost like that. That kind of fairground thing, right? Where if you go
Mm-hmm.
to like a state fair or something, you're gonna have the rides are gonna like they're all competing to make as much noise. Or back in the day when we used to have arcades, and you go into an arcade, you have
Yeah.
the arcade machines kind of playing. It was kind of like that. So that they had loud music, and so drunk people were like, oh, I'm gonna go there. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like a neon sign,
Yeah.
but with
Yeah.
sound.
That's fascinating. I never had an experience like that before.
And I mean,
I'm
again, the UK is a lot more. So for example, it's pretty much acceptable in most places here to like drink in the streets. So
okay.
there are kind of specific signs. There are specific "you cannot drink in this area" kind of signs.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
default assumption is that you can. And so again, it's more kind of normal, I guess, to have a kind of spontaneous party taking place outside of a convenience store or something.
Criminy. I know a few college kids that would that would love to have an experience like that in the city. That's really interesting. So moving on from that, I wanted to ask you about the package experience with Pictures of Gwen. How has it been getting packages out to people? Has it been particularly easy or hard to get all the objects that you want?
Yeah, it's been really difficult. I would say that
Mm,
yeah, it's been a real challenge. There's a kind of a rule in like software development that's called the 1990 rule. And the 1990 rule states that the first 90% of a project takes 90% of the time, and the last
okay.
10% takes another 90%. Did you catch that?
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah, I caught that. Yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
and so I feel like it's almost even more so than that with when you're producing physical things, that everything is about 3 times as complicated as you think it's going to be. And and also, you know, with the pandemic, that's been really, really hard, because you work out kind of all the lead times on something, and you go, okay, I can order this item and it's going to arrive on this day, and then suddenly everything's delayed by 10 days. And obviously, because we're doing a real-time experience, that's a real problem.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And so there's been a lot of having to adapt and just kind of remain flexible due to packaging. Also, a real challenge that we've had is trying to get things to arrive roughly on the same day. In that, for you know, we have players in the US, we have players in the UK, players in Europe, you know, players in Norway. It's trying to work out, okay, how long is shipping going to take? So what days do we need to send what things out so they all roughly arrive on, you know, within kind of 2 or 3 days of each other? Because again, it's a real time experience, and so you can't have something arrive a week late, because that will ruin that experience for that customer.
That is so much care that's being put into it. How many packages are you guys sending out every month?
So about 50.
That's less than 100, but even then, that sounds like so much work.
Oh yeah,
That sounds like so much work.
Exactly. It's one of those things that you think, oh, we can manage that, and yeah, we're right on the point where we have to kind of reconsider things, and we have to look at, you know, looking at fulfillment partners and that kind of thing, because it's just everything is much more difficult than you think it's going to be. And I feel like we didn't go into this naive. I feel like we did a lot of due diligence, and even then it's 3 times as difficult.
Christ, man. I feel for you guys. I mean, you're doing a fantastic job with sending packages and now everything. Response has been great, but oh my god, that is so much work for a piece of Unfiction.
Yeah,
that's crazy, man.
Definitely, it's been a real kind of learning curve, because again, I think what happens is you have these small easy tasks, and one small easy task is a small easy task, but 10 small easy tasks, that kind of builds up and becomes a complicated thing. I mean, like with the Chicken 2K, for example, you know, creating the receipts and then stapling those receipts to the fly, like that sounds like an easy thing. It was an absolute nightmare.
You got to do that 50 times.
Well, you got to do it 50 times to my exacting standards. Do you know what I mean?
Oh my god.
And yeah, we do have pretty high quality assurance. I mean, we're charging a premium. You know, I feel like again, going back to what I was saying, we really want to come across as a premium kind of high end thing, and so you know, we have to keep doing it until it's right. And you only get things that are right, and if that one's wrong, we're gonna have to make it again.
Oh my god. How much paper do you guys reckon you've had to recycle and do all over again?
A fair amount. That's another thing. Again, is trying to look at the kind of, you know, we really try to be as ethical as we possibly can be. So again, always trying to make sure that we're sourcing things from ethical people, and kind of trying to marry the profitability, and making sure that we can keep afloat with also, you know, bottom line, it's like I can't sell you things that were made by slaves. Like, that's just morally wrong. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And so we have to be very, very careful about where we're sourcing things from. And a lot of the time that means that we're paying substantially more, but we know it's from this guy, and he's legit. We know he's good.
Based. Based as hell. That's my pleasure. All right. Moving on from that, we're going to move into general Unfiction questions, and then we'll take a break, everybody. So this is a recurring segment on
Uh-huh.
the Unfictional Soundscape. I have to ask everybody this because it's an unfiction-based show. What is your favorite unfiction? Let me say that again. What is your favorite unfiction piece if you had to choose? And you can choose multiple if you feel so inclined.
So, I'm going to be potentially a little controversial here, and I'm going to say Monday Night Raw.
Monday Night Raw, like
As in
wrestling?
WWE? Yes.
Really?
Uh-huh.
That's your favorite you would classify that as unfiction.
Right. Yes. So this is where I'm saying I might be being slightly controversial, but I kind of want to try and push this. So I feel like within if you think about the definition of unfiction, okay, that we're dealing with fictional work that presents itself as non-fiction, presents itself as legit. Often in a kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge, knowing way, the audience is often in on the joke, right? And it's like a big thing that you know when you speak to non-wrestling fans and you say I'm a wrestling fan, one of the first things they'll say is but it's fake, right? And you're like, oh, because I thought I thought the undead wizard could actually teleport. Right?
Wow. I've never thought of it like that.
Right?
Oh my god.
And so within pro wrestling, you have this idea of kayfabe. Okay? So kayfabe is it's essentially the idea of suspending disbelief, okay? And it's very related, in my opinion, to this is not a game. So what we do in our industry is we do this is not a game, and even when it's very clearly a game and everyone knows it's a game, we pretend it's not. And in pro wrestling, it's a very similar idea. They have this idea of kayfabe. And I feel like, pro wrestling's been around in this form for like 100 years. And I feel like there is a huge amount that our industry could learn from pro wrestling. Explicitly, I feel like the way that, frankly, what we're doing right now, I feel like is. So let me just kind of gather my thoughts. So wrestling went from explicitly it's all real, and it's real, and it's a legitimate contest, and it's real, and if when Jon Stewart kind of asks someone if wrestling's fake, he gets slapped, and it was that was how it was presented, right? And we went from that to where we are today, where you have current world champions, and you can go on Twitch, and you can listen to them talking about how they're developing that character and the ideas that they have coming up. And I really feel that's what I really feel that has a huge impact. And I feel that the unfiction world, for a long time, there's kind of been this unwritten rule of you can't talk about your project until it's finished. And I'm kind of trying to challenge that. And I think that that's my kind of we should learn from kayfabe rant. But yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say I would definitely agree with that a lot more a couple years ago. I think now with the advent of the Night Mind Index, or even more so, if I'd like to name names, I'd say Kay kind of pioneered the claiming your project even while it's still going on, and we've sort of gone past this veil of you can't talk about it until your project's done. I think some people still stick by that. Paul definitely stick by that with Petscop. But now we're kind of I think the unfiction community, at least in my experience, is starting to grow up a little bit in that sense where we are doing the kayfabe thing,
right? And I feel like like where we are as an industry is almost kind of I feel like where wrestling was in like the mid to late 90s, and I feel like it's in both instances that opening up, that kind of peeling back the curtain I feel is the important thing, and I feel that
Yeah,
that is yeah. I'm very excited about the Unfiction as a space, it feels like
yeah,
it's exploding, and I really
totally.
feel like people claiming their work has a big part to do with that, and also
I
the
agree.
work that you're doing. Again, the amazing
Oh,
stuff that
thanks, man.
Nick's doing, documenting things.
Hmm.
Inside of Mind, similarly doing the next Po guys, all of that stuff. I think
Yeah.
it's weird. I feel like we almost I don't know whether do you know GDC, the Game Developers Conference?
I know of it.
Sure. So there's a great talk that was on there from a couple of days ago. I honestly can't remember, who it was. But there's a great talk on there that was talking about designing for audience, like designing for spectators, as opposed to designing
Hmm.
for players. And this
Mm.
idea that
Okay.
modern games are streamed. Okay, and
Yes.
that and I really, again, I feel like with there's a lot of that going on, that you almost have these people that are able to experience these unfiction projects more as spectators, and
Hmm.
that I think is also super powerful, and I think we're going to start seeing more kind of nods to that, and more people kind of actually designing for their spectators as much as for their players.
I would like that very much. I think that's the way to go.
Hmm.
So moving on from that, uh, you said your favorite unfiction piece is Raw. What would you say is your least favorite and or most disappointing unfiction piece?
So this is really hard. I mean, it's so I haven't had, with working on Pictures of Gwen, I've been really busy, and so I haven't had a real chance to explore a lot of contemporary stuff. But
Hmm.
I'm gonna again be maybe controversial here. Pretty much everything that I've seen lately, has been pretty disappointing. I mean, there's absolutely exceptions, like PB here, Paranormal Paranoids. There's some great
Nice.
stuff.
Yeah.
But I guess I feel like, in a lot of ways, due to lockdown, that I think
Hmm.
a lot of the kind of immersive theater people have transitioned into AOG and transitioned into Unfiction,
Yeah.
and in no way wanting to take anything away from these people, take anything away from their credentials. I feel like a lot of it's been kind of clumsy. And I think
Mm.
that what
Okay.
we've kind of seen is almost kind of making experiences out of necessity. So what I
Ooh.
mean is like it's a port. It wasn't developed for the system. That it was like,
Okay.
how can we adapt this live experience to online, as opposed to how
Okay.
can we create an online experience,
I see.
right?
Okay.
And I feel like there's
Okay.
been
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot
Yeah.
of that that's happened in recent stuff. That there's been some people who are really creative and really talented, who have these really interesting stories, but they're telling a live story and they're porting it to online, as opposed to saying, okay, how can we use this format uniquely to tell a story. But I might be
Okay.
talking shit there, but that's certainly my thoughts.
Would you care to name any names, or would you prefer to leave
No,
it
no, no, no,
somewhat
no,
anonymous?
no. Yeah. I think it's probably best not to.
Totally fair. Totally fair. All right. Moving on from that. Do you feel unfiction is kind of, I don't want to say that it's mainly prominent in America, but there are a lot of
Hmm.
folks in.
Oh, I mean, I'm pretty sure that it's like 97% of it takes place in LA, the other 2% takes place
Mhm.
in New York, and then it's rest of the world. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Do you ever feel somewhat left out being in the UK? Or do you feel sorry for people in the US who don't get in on the good stuff that you got there?
So that's an interesting question. So I'm actually a U.S. citizen, but obviously I currently live in the UK.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm actually a citizen of the great state of Florida. Yeah,
Wow.
but as yeah, been living here for quite some time, and I don't
Mm,
know. I feel like the UK and the US have this have this interesting
that's
relationship
fine.
in that it's like take like punk rock, right? The it's
Yeah.
like Malcolm McLaren goes to New York, he sees the New York Dolls, he goes back to
Hmm.
London, he's like, right lads, we're gonna do this. And then they
Hmm.
create the Sex Pistols, and then the Sex Pistols go to the States and they sell it back to them. And then America
Yeah.
goes, okay, great, oh, the Sex Pistols, right, we're gonna do, and then they sell it back to us. And I feel like there's
Yeah.
that kind of culture exchange. That
Yes.
I feel like what the US does really, really well is kind of refining things or kind of leveling them up.
Hmm.
I feel like the UK, it's very much a creative hotbed. It's kind of it's full of inspiration, but the UK doesn't quite have the same infrastructure. So taking it
Hmm.
back, for example, talking about EDM. So
Yeah.
absolutely, dance music and kind of club culture was and has been a part of the culture in the UK for years and years and years and years and years, and
Hmm.
absolutely it's been kind of pioneered in kind of grimy basements, but we
Hmm.
don't have Vegas, and so therefore we can't do EDC. Like EDC can
Mm.
only
Okay.
happen in Vegas, and Vegas can
Yeah.
only happen in the US. And
Yeah.
so I think that
Absolutely.
it's that thing that I think that again, speaking explicitly about the immersive stuff. I think groups like Punch Drunk, with what's their show, Sleep No More.
Okay.
This is a UK show, and they kind of take it to the States, and it blows up in New York. Similarly, with people like
Mm.
Secret Cinema, I know that Secret Cinema are about to start doing US shows, and I imagine that they will be very successful and will
Yeah.
probably kind of really level up what they're doing because America just kind of has that infrastructure, and
Yeah.
then again, it's like even look at something like Disney, right? That
Hmm.
when Walt wanted to design Disney World, he came to Europe and he looked at the theme parks in Europe, or they weren't theme parks really, but he looked at what they were doing and
Yeah. Yeah.
then was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay, what if I do that but times 20?
Uh huh.
And I think that
And
yeah,
that's how we got
that's
Disney.
what you guys are great at. You guys are going, okay, let's do that but bigger.
Uh huh. That's true. I can get behind that. I mean, I've studied music history in college, and from what I remember, it is a lot like that. I mean, we started out with um I have to organize the history in my head really quickly. So
Sure, I
uh
can jump in on this as well. I think I know where you're going.
yeah. Yeah. So America is where folk music as we know it today, or as we knew it before, was born, and then rock and roll spurned from that, and then the UK took that and made bands like the Beatles, and then that came back our way, and then that
Uh-huh.
inspired literally everything after it, and then it just went down a rabbit hole from there. I agree with you completely. It is like we kind of get your ideas that you folks have over there, and then we sort of refine it. And I think it's
Yeah.
mainly because of the what's the word, reputation. Yeah.
I mean, even if we look at the idea, like if we look at the idea of like a guitar,
Yeah.
that what we think of as a modern guitar, that's an American invention.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And
Um.
that you sorry, you
Yeah.
had
You're fine.
guys, you had like Irish immigrants that were coming to the US, and they brought with them kind of fife and drum, and that kind of fife and drum stuff got picked up in the Civil War, and then if you play that on a guitar, that becomes the blues.
Yes.
And then what then happens is you get these blues records, and then Led Zeppelin just steal it, like just
Yeah.
wholesale
Yeah.
steal
Yeah.
it. Okay, but then you can't play Hollywood unless you're in Hollywood, right?
Yes.
So Zeppelin have to then go to Hollywood, and they have to destroy the hotel rooms, and do you know what I mean? And I feel like it is that constant back and forth.
Yes. And that has led to hyperpop.
I do love hyperpop.
I do too, man. I've been me and my buddies are going to be heading down. It's totally off topic, but me and my buddies are going to be going to a 100 Gex concert in October.
Great.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Very excited for that.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And yeah, nice to be out dancing again.
Yeah. Well, I've never really been to a concert like that where it's hype. Like I've only been to concerts where it's you just sit there and you listen to what the band does. It's not like mosh pits. So this will be a new interesting experience for me. I hope I can siphon some of that jungle music energy into the concert. One last question, and then we'll go on break. Is there anything specifically about the Unfiction community that grinds your gears that you like to stop, or would you say you're more pleased than ever with how everything is being approached?
So certainly on the whole, more pleased than ever. I think what we were talking about before, informed consent.
Yeah, totally.
That I think we're dealing with a really powerful format. And, particularly with a lot of games, they deal with some really dark subjects.
Yeah.
And I feel like they can have a really profound emotional impact. And so I think, not that I necessarily feel that this is a problem in the community, but I feel like it's something that we should always be aware of. And I also find, so I kind of call it like 90s speak. So I feel like we have this tendency or this inability to describe the field in simple language.
Okay.
So I for example, I love Unfiction. Unfiction is a great word. But I feel like we have this tendency to just come up with these overly technical words that almost sound, to me they sound really 90s. That it can be, we're an immersive transmedia experience that focuses on player agency, and do you know what I mean? As opposed to just saying what it is. And so I've been really impressed with, for example, like Nintendo World, that they have the slogan "Play in the real world this summer." Or Disney, again, the Galactic Star Cruiser. I don't know whether you've checked that thing out. That's going to be pretty incredible.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so the way that they're describing that experience is choose your destiny.
Yeah.
Right? And I feel like if we were trying to, or if our community was to do it, it would all be, it's a massively interactive live event that takes place in the metaverse. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it just, again, I feel like one of the reasons why like escape rooms have thrived is because it's an escape room.
Yeah.
Like you can tell your grandmother it's an escape room, like a room you escape from. Yes, grandma, that's what it is.
Says it on the tin.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. And so I feel like, again, it's like everything doesn't need to be gamification. It can just be a game.
I see. So you like the simple marketing terms. We don't need to overcomplicate things. We can just say it. It's as simple as this, where it's choose your own destiny or be part of the experience. We don't need to do this whole like flashy niche, ever-growing niche language where we can just say easy as possible.
In my opinion, and I think that certainly there is a space for that. When we're dealing with more academic kind of ideas.
Yeah.
That, but I really feel that when explaining it to the average kind of player, and it's like a real problem that I've always kind of, well, not always, but a real problem that I've encountered kind of recently is when you say to someone alternate reality game, What they hear is augmented reality game.
Okay.
And so you say, I make alternative reality games, and they go, oh, like Pokemon Go, right?
Yes, but actually no.
Right. And so this, I think, is a real challenge in that for me. I mean, this may not be your experience, but certainly in my experience,
Yeah.
the word reality, I feel is just fundamentally associated with some form of kind of wearable or kind of some kind of technology that you're interfacing with.
Interesting.
And so that when you say reality, people are like, oh, you mean like mixed reality or virtual reality or
Yeah.
augmented reality? And say, oh, no, alternate reality. It's nothing like that at all.
Yeah.
And this is why I really like the word unfiction, because at least whilst a lot of people don't know what it means, there's no weight to it. There's no confusion. They're just like, oh, what does that mean? And
Yeah.
you tell them.
Yes, you just have the definition ready on hand, and it's not like it's not an
Right.
assumption that they can have about. Oh, I assume. Oh, so you do stuff with like phones or whatever, where they lead you down like Randonautica or whatever. No. We're not doing that.
Yes.
It's much simpler than that. I'd also
Yes.
like to bank off of something you said earlier, where we gamify things a lot. I feel like that that kind of speak where we overcomplicate it can kind of be used to gatekeep.
Right.
I feel like that's been toned down in recent years, but definitely, back in the day, in the early 2010s, there was a lot of gatekeeping. A lot of people like, well, it's a blah, 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 rattling off all the terms and like scaring off
Yes.
the people that are just trying to have a good time.
Right. Yes, and I feel like as content creators, we want. So I can only speak for myself, but certainly for what I do, I want to challenge my audience. I want my audience to feel like there's a challenge they need to overcome, but I never want them to feel stupid or to feel. Do you know what I mean? I feel like if the moment my game makes you feel dumb or makes you feel unwanted, you're going to stop playing my game.
Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty, everybody. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. We're back from our break, ready to keep going. So, moving into the second part of this podcast, or the second prominent feature of this podcast, we're going to talk about music and sound design. So, you had spoken a little bit about your experience with music, specifically with composition. Have you had any formal training with composition, or is it just something you've done in pastime? Do you have any instruments that you've ever studied?
So in terms of, I did study performing arts, and there was definitely some kind of music modules covered there, but honestly not that much. So in terms of kind of formal training, not really. Though I've kind of played and produced for about 25 years. So I and myself alongside Luke, responsible for kind of all the kind of compositions and sound design and stuff in the game. And yeah, in terms of instruments, I don't play any kind of brass or woodwind, but if it's kind of got strings or keys, I can probably play it badly.
Okay, all right. I see.
Yeah, I would say I'm a much better producer than I am a player.
I see. Okay. So what about designing sound? Have you ever had any formal training for that? And moreover, what goes into the process for choosing and making sounds like the ones in the Super Eats website?
Okay, so no, again, nothing real formal. Again, little kind of bits of stuff when I was kind of younger in college, but we're talking a module here and there.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. My sound design is pretty self-taught. In terms of the process, so I think I think the key to realism is reference, right? And
Okay.
so a lot of the time is you want to kind of start by being like, okay, what does a real website sound like? What kind of sounds? And then you kind of want to marry that with like I have this idea that like reality is unrealistic.
Okay.
So again, like going back to like the wrestling thing, for example, the idea of like
Yeah.
stamping the mat when you punch someone or like slapping your leg
Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
kick someone. That's if I was to punch you, it wouldn't sound like that. But
Yeah.
reality is unrealistic, right?
Yes.
The and it's the whole if I'm shooting a silencer in a movie, it needs to
Hmm.
sound like a silencer in a movie, not like an actual silencer. And
John Wick
so
Chapter
yeah,
2.
so a lot of it is just starts with kind of trying to identify what kind of sound we want. And then I just spent a lot of time looking through sound libraries. I'm a big fan of Splice. I don't know if you know Splice.
I do not know.
So it's kind of like Netflix for sounds.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
it's like a subscription service, and you basically you pay. I think it's like about $8 a month or something, and you get a certain amount of credits. It's kind of like stock imagery, like how you might have a subscription to like Adobe or any other kind of stock image kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
So it's
Yeah.
kind of like that, and they have a bunch of really they have a really great sound library. And so I spent a lot of time just kind of looking through sounds. And then once you kind of get your basic raw material, I tend to do everything in Ableton Live. That's kind of
Okay.
my preferred DAW.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then it's just kind of manipulating stuff and kind of playing with things. Again, like with like the Gwen's theme, for example, right?
Hmm.
It's like, okay, we wanted to make something that was lo-fi,
Yeah.
and it's very, very common that lo-fi is sampled from anime. So a lot of the source
Hmm.
material tends to be anime. So we
Yeah.
were like, okay, we're not going to be able to license that. So what we're going
So
to need to do is we're going to need to create something that sounds a bit like that. And so it was this kind of process of starting with, okay, let's try and create the sort of original sound, and then let's sample ourselves, and then let's manipulate that. Do you see what I mean? So it's
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
almost kind of like 90% research and kind of pre-production and kind of working it out, and then just 10% kind of doing it.
That is really really interesting. Um, that's kind of my well no, not really my experience because I haven't had to license anything as of yet.
Hmm.
Um, I mostly just choose the sounds that work with what's going on. But that
Hmm.
Splice website that you mentioned, I am
Hmm.
absolutely going to have to check that out, and I will put a link to it
Yeah,
in the description.
it's a really great resource that they have. They just if you want that sound, there's a
Hmm.
very good chance that you can get that sound.
Fantastic, awesome, awesome, awesome. Um, Now you just mentioned pictures of Gwen in 2 a.m. air.
Hmm.
I would like to do a quick workshop of 2 a.m. air.
Okay.
I want to I want to listen to it really quickly with you and
Hmm.
kind of go through it as we move along. And I want you to talk about the process of making it.
Sure.
So, what inspired you guys to do this specific chord progression?
Like I was saying before, we came from that starting point of saying, okay, so it's very common for lo-fi to sample anime, and so
Mhm.
we basically started looking at anime composition, and we started looking at what are kind of common chord progressions, and looking at more kind of Eastern kind of chord progressions as opposed to kind of more traditional Western stuff, and we just kind of just arrived at that kind of movement, and then I just kind of played around with some chords until I found chords that followed that sequence that I liked, and then wrote a kind of basic top line melody over it, and then we had the kind of the basis for, okay, this is our source material.
Okay. So what about instrumentation? Why these specific instruments?
So again, we wanted to evoke something that felt like it pre-existed. That it should feel like this was something that was old, and that's something that had been sampled. So that we wanted to kind of create that source material that sounded like it could be the intro to, you know, a TV show from the 80s or something. Do you know what I mean? We wanted to kind of have that feel of something that this is some obscure thing that you sort of half remember, and it's been sampled and it's been updated and made into a modern thing, but that certainly the piano should have, in our minds, is like 20 years ago that was recorded. So we wanted to kind of capture that sound.
Okay. Do you have any, you know, in this sort of world building idea that this is like this is sampled from a show from like 20 years ago? Do you have any thoughts behind, like, or have you considered, like, who recorded this to begin with?
Absolutely.
Who
Absolutely. It's fascinating. You are the first person to even ask about this or pick up on this.
Well, I think that's an important question.
Yes. That is categorically a thing. Yes, that there is. This is absolutely sampled from something that exists in the world.
Could you talk about, like, who has sampled this and what were they trying to evoke with their choosing of that specific piano sample?
I'm not sure that I could without kind of revealing too much. But yeah, no, it's definitely so, you know, definitely in the world. 2AM Air are a group that they exist in the world, and that what this is sampled from exists in the world, and so there's a backstory behind pretty much anything that we put in the game, and then it's just a case of seeing what the audience pick up on. It's almost like the kind of fog of war, like in a video game. When you walk into that area, they've walked into this area, let's render that area.
Yeah, okay.
But it's all there waiting to be rendered. It's just a case of seeing what people pick up on.
Okay. Would you say when you guys were creating this, were you trying to come up with something that would be somewhat representative of Gwen herself?
Oh, absolutely. So, yeah, again, in your last thing, when you picked up on the leitmotif, 100%. That is what we're doing. You are absolutely correct on that. That is correct. That's what that means.
You heard it here first, folks. You heard it here first. Author man got it right.
Yeah. 10 on 10.
Perfect. Good stuff. Alrighty. Fantastic. We're gonna move into the final section of the episode here, everybody. I'm going to ask you a couple questions about media, you know, just general media stuff, you know, to get an idea of what kind of stuff do you like, and maybe some of the things that have inspired you over the years. So, do you have any favorite movies?
Videodrome, Blade Runner, Usual Suspects,
Based.
Wild Things,
Based.
Yeah,
fuck yes, you. Dude. Awesome.
Let's go with those.
Okay, good with me, man. That is a fantastic list. Do you have any least favorite movies or most disappointing movies?
I really hate 500 Days of Summer.
Okay, I've not heard of that movie. What grinds your gears about it?
It's a bad movie. It's not an awful movie, but yeah, I don't know. It makes me ick.
Okay, all right, I can get behind that. That's fair. Do you have any favorite TV shows?
So like I said, I'm a huge pro wrestling fan. I watch a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah,
pro
of course, yeah,
wrestling.
of course. Okay,
Um, TNG, like Star Trek: The Next Generation.
okay, gotcha. Okay,
Um, Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
okay.
X-Files. You know, a lot. I really like that kind of monster of the week format.
I see.
Also, I
Yeah.
love 40 Rock. Sorry, 30 Rock.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm not familiar with those shows.
yeah. It's Tina Fey who wrote Mean Girls. It's like it's super self-referential, super meta. It's yeah, incredibly funny show.
Okay, cool, good stuff. Do you have any least favorite TV shows?
Um, I kind of feel like I don't watch them, so I don't know.
That's fair. That's totally fair.
Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I don't own a TV. You know, if I'm gonna watch some content, I explicitly sit down to watch it. So
Okay.
yeah, there's not been a lot of stuff that I've watched and kind of been like, oh, I hate it. I mean, again, wrestling. You know, I watch a lot of wrestling. Sometimes it's awful.
Yeah. Well, that's them's the breaks for like 100-year-old
Uh huh.
TV show, man.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you had mentioned earlier with video games, you had mentioned
Uh huh.
Warhammer. Uh, do you have any other video games that you particularly like?
Yes, I'd probably put Resident Evil 2 is probably number one on my list.
Okay.
Um, you know, Portal 2 is
Yeah.
also kind of very high on my
Yeah.
list.
Totally.
Loom, I don't know if you do you know Loom?
No, I don't think I do.
Okay, so Loom was a kind of point and click adventure. It was LucasArts. You'd love it, to be honest. It
Oh,
has a
really?
really simple interface, and you cast magic. You use magic through music. So you basically,
Ooh.
for example, there's a bit where there's an owl. Okay, and the
Okay.
owl kind of hoots a particular sequence of notes.
Okay.
And that sequence of notes is the spell to see in the dark. And so
Okay.
you
I
kind of
see.
have to kind of go around the world and kind of interact with the world and listen to it. And yeah, it's kind of hard to explain, but it was a very influential game on me. The other thing I love about Loom is it's kind of like you can't die. It was
Mm.
one of the earliest games that I remember playing that you can't die in. That
Okay.
there's no fail state. Like you can't do anything wrong. You're just in this world.
Okay. I see.
Um,
Uh,
and then also the kind of the cinematic kind of stuff and the kind of immersive sim stuff. So things like Another World, Flashback, Deus Ex.
okay. I see. Um, mentioning the no death state, I
Mm-hmm.
have been loving when games do not do that. I think it's great.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically in regards to Soma and Amnesia Rebirth, there is
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you don't really die in those games. You just kind of move back a little bit. And I
Right.
really appreciate that for uh realism reasons. The only
Right.
game that I can think of off the top of my head that makes sense when you die and you come back is Death Stranding, and that's
Mm-hmm.
for a bunch of fucking Kojima
Well, it's
related
again,
reasons.
it's like it's so interesting how media, media really relies on and is defined by its medium, right? And so
Hmm.
when video games first were put out, they were in arcades, and the
Yeah,
function was to get quarters. Okay,
yeah.
and so this is why you have the concept of lives. Whereas the concept of
Mhm.
lives just kind of doesn't even make sense in a modern video game.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little outdated at this point.
It's save points. You have infinite lives. You die and then you go back to the next save point.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And so yeah, I definitely I love stuff like that, like Firewatch and games that have that. You're in a space and you can just do what you want in that space, and there is almost no threat or no kind of obvious obstacle, and you just get to experience in it. And I understand a lot of people, they're like, that's not a game, it's a walking simulator. Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah,
I love that shit.
I do too. I absolutely adore it. Well, I don't mind having lives either. I'm a media enthusiast, man. I'm not picky, but I definitely don't cotton much to motherfuckers on the internet who are constantly like, well, it doesn't have merit because it's like easy mode, or it has Metro
Right?
Exodus.
Again, it's like what I was saying before is and this has been a real challenge as a designer, in that I want my games to be challenging, but I never want them to make you feel stupid. And because when you feel stupid, you stop playing, right? If that you're having a bad experience, and if you're having a bad experience, I want it to be a very tailored bad experience that I very deliberately I'm messing with you for a second here, and then I'm going to make it all okay again. Okay.
Totally.
Whereas if you're coming up to it and it's frustrating, and it uses kind of moon logic, and the community are just being dicks to each other, you're not going to engage with it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
totally.
so
Absolutely.
I do feel that, it's that whole thing of so many people, will buy a game and never finish it. And I feel like that's a real shame, right? I feel like these developers put a whole amount of effort into creating this experience, and maybe if we just lowered the barrier to entry a little bit and made it a little bit easier, they might finish a game.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean?
I don't think there should be any shame in that. I don't understand what the point is of complaining about a game that not only has different difficulties, but has, like I said before, something like a reader mode. Like Metro Exodus having a reader mode to me makes perfect sense, because the most important part of that game to me is the story, is experiencing it, and I feel like it being more accessible for people who don't play first-person shooters. I mean, especially a game like Metro, where I firmly classify that as an anti-FPS, where it's frustrating to shoot things, it doesn't really feel good, and you really shouldn't be shooting things very often. You should be trying to spare as many things as possible, and having to manage resources and stuff, and clean your guns and everything.
Going back to saying, Resident Evil 2 being one of my favorite games, that felt like every shot was precious. And you're like, oh god, I'm gonna have to let a round off. Oh no, I shouldn't have done that. That I feel that really captured that resource management thing in an action title like nothing else has done.
Totally, but I don't think it would be a bad thing if that had a reader mode to it, so the people could just play it.
Right. Yes. Exactly. And the I mean, even so speaking directly about my work, it's there are multiple things that I can think of that players haven't discovered yet. That are it's not time locked. They're there on the internet. No one's found it.
Okay.
But at the same time, so there is that if you want to go deep, you can go deep, and there's still stuff to discover. At the same time, I want the core story to be accessible, and I don't want to gatekeep.
Has there ever been a point where you found that to be kind of frustrating, where they don't find something that you're putting out to them?
It's unbelievable. So yeah, you create these really, really, really complicated puzzles, and they rip through them.
Yeah.
There was a puzzle we did for the Boomtown game that basically involved this kind of combination lock, where you essentially had to click the right kind of sequence of symbols on a screen. And we designed this game to take them about a day, maybe 2 days to get through it, and they got through it in like 7 minutes.
Oh my god.
Do you know what I mean? Like, they just ripped through it. And so, yeah, every time we design something that we're like, okay, this is going to get them, this is going to stump them, they rip through it. Anytime we, maybe because they're looking for that hard thing, that when we're like, okay, we're just going to chuck them a bone now, they completely ignore the bone. And that they just, it's almost like they don't see it. And we're like, oh, no. We needed you to see that. That was important to the story. Like, we just told you this thing. And everyone ignores it. Do you know what I mean?
Oh my god.
Yeah.
How often does that happen?
It's it's certainly common. It's certainly a thing that it always fascinates us how the players will pick up on these kind of absolutely tiny details and get really in depth in it, and often do like more research than we did. It's like, you're absolutely right, but you've almost you found these connections that we didn't even find. And then, yeah, but I almost feel like if it's too obvious, if like a lot of the time we can just kind of, and that may be something that we might start incorporating more into design, maybe, is using that hiding things in plain sight, because we know if we just show it to you, you don't look at it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I was actually going to ask about that. Has that like taught you, it's clearly taught you, like, maybe hiding it in plain sight. Is there anything else that you've learned from people either getting it in like minute or people missing it completely? Like, what kind of learning experiences have you had from that, and how will you incorporate that in the future?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Thank you.
As I say, it is always, the whole thing is an ongoing process, so we're always responding to the audience, and I think that I guess it's weird. It's almost like a feel, I think. I know that that's kind of like a terrible answer, but I almost feel like I've been working with this audience for a while now, and I feel like the audience knows how I think, and I sort of know how the audience thinks, and we're kind of moving more into sync. And so it's about, we're constantly iterating on things, we're constantly changing things, and not making big changes, but just little, okay, we need to slightly modify this thing because the audience picked up on this. And so, like I was saying, like that idea of the video game where you go into space, so we've got to render this. They looked at the painting. Okay, now we're going to have to tell them what the painting is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what you were saying about it being a feel, that totally makes sense to me. I mean, it would have to be a feel.
Right. It's like DJing or playing music. It's like, well, what should I play next? Like, how does a DJ know what to play next? And sometimes, a lot of the time you'll have a set list, you know what you're going to do, but sometimes that set's just not working tonight. Like, it's the wrong kind of audience. You have to call the play in real time.
Totally. Have you ever thought of, like, or do you all at Rogue Beacon take statistics of, like, which puzzles went fast, which puzzles went slow? Like, have you guys ever thought of
yeah. We do quite a lot of analytics.
Okay, good.
Yeah, most things that players are doing are being tracked. So not only for, as you say, so that we can internally, learn what works and what doesn't work, totally. and what people got stuck on, but also, because ultimately on many occasions we're going to be doing work for clients, and we're going to be, we're trying to demonstrate a certain level of engagement or whatever, so yeah, we track pretty much everything.
Okay, that's a very smart idea. It's a really, really good idea. I mean, I'd expect you guys would do that. You're like an actual, like, legit company.
Yes, just about.
Yeah, we don't really have a whole lot of companies in the Unfiction community.
But I mean, there's Again, like Google Analytics will, you know, I actually don't look after this part of the business. So shout out to Tamsin who looks after this for us.
Mhm.
But yeah, Google Analytics, I'm sure that one can type some stuff into YouTube, watch a few videos, and in a couple of days you can probably teach yourself how to do it.
Okay.
And it's free, and it just you can track what people are clicking on, and how you can track a whole bunch of stuff. And it's also, I mean, one of the things that actually did come about really early on is we realized that almost all of our audience are on phones.
Really?
Like I would say, I believe at the last time I checked, it was 87%.
87%.
Yes,
Wow.
so almost our entire audience is playing the game on a phone, and I imagine that they're commuting on the way to work, or they're coming back from work, or they're going outside for a cigarette and having it all. But almost all of our audience are connecting via a mobile phone. And so that's something that we had to immediately go, okay, well, we're going to have to make sure that we have to design for mobile first now.
Wow. That is that is fascinating. I
Hmm.
don't, man, I don't, man, unfiction creators, maybe you guys should be taking taking some notes about that, because that is
Sure. No,
really
it's
interesting.
as I say, it's consistently 85 or above, depending on what day we look at it. But it's certainly, for every person on a desktop, there's four people on a phone.
Wow. That's, as I would usually expect people to be on desktop. I mean, or laptop or something. I don't know.
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
just something that I would usually assume. But more people being on phone is really
Well, I
interesting.
think I think because it's kind of real time, and I guess it depends on how you're playing the game, right? If
Mhm.
you're one of the people who doesn't really pay attention during the month and you wait till the box and then you sit down, and maybe you sit down with your partner, and you're gonna play the game for 2 hours,
Mhm.
and that's how you play, then in that case I think you're much more likely to be on laptop, desktop.
Yeah.
If you're more playing every day, I feel that it almost is that there's almost like that parasocial kind of element, right?
Uh
Where
huh.
you're on Instagram and you're seeing what your friends are up to. Oh, you're seeing what Gwen's up to. Oh, she mentioned this website. Let me check that out. Do you know what I
Wow.
mean? So I think it
Yeah.
is more casual.
Holy shit. I've never, man, how things have changed since the good old
Hmm.
fashioned days of Marble Hornets. That is bananas, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody take notes. That's
Back
I
when YouTube worked.
Yeah, back when YouTube yeah, back in the day. Back in the golden age.
Uh-huh.
Awesome. That is some fantastic information. Everybody should be writing that down. So moving back to miscellaneous media questions, uh, I found that music tastes for creatives such as we
Hmm.
shifts depending upon the changing of the seasons. What songs are you bumping during what songs are you bumping during the last kiss of summer and coming into the cold embrace of autumn?
Oh, okay. So I guess maybe I can kind of just think of this in terms of like summer artists and autumn artists. So I mean, so generally I listen to a lot of hip hop.
Mm,
So certainly, like for me, kind of a classic summer album would be kind of like The Chronic by Dr. Dre.
okay.
Um, I love Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys.
Mm-hmm.
Hotel California.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. What a fall autumn records. October Rust, Typo Negative.
Okay.
Baduism, Erica Badu, Songs in the Key of Life, Stevie Wonder.
Okay. Yeah. 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 Good stuff.
Um, and then in terms of like what listening to kind of right now. I mean, I think probably the last things that I've heard that have caught my attention. Willow Smith's album is great.
Okay.
The Linders. I don't know if you heard these guys.
No,
They're basically children, but they're amazing.
Okay.
The drummers.
Yeah, say their name for me one more time.
The Linders.
Okay. The Linders.
Their drummers like 10.
What?
And it's them like live at the local library, and they basically kind of sound like kind of Misfits, Ramones kind of thing. Just one of the more interesting kind of punk bands that I've heard in a long time, and they're babies.
Okay, I will definitely have to check all those out. Especially that the Linders. That sounds like a very very interesting thing to add to the collection. So, final question, and then we're going to wrap things up. The amount of work that you guys put in at Rogue Beacon only makes the experience all the better, with the realization that real human folks put thought and care into what they were giving to the audience, i.e. packages, the immersive theater, all that. An immersive theater is an incredibly involved process, and getting people to come out seems kind of scary. And I'd imagine most audience members would say the same, that it is kind of anxiety-inducing to think, oh my god, are people going to come out for this? And even looking at pictures of Gwen where you guys are sending packages all over the world, the amount of work that has to go, that we heard, goes into it is staggering. What would you say to the audience member who wants to do things in the community that involve that physical element, that real care, for their audience members, but are not sure where to start and are afraid to even get started to begin with?
So I think, to be totally honest, I think the first thing I would say is, understand that it's a crazy amount of work, and whatever that crazy amount of work you think it is, it's much more work than that.
Okay.
And that you kind of need to be compelled. You kind of need to have, for whatever reason, there's a story you just have to tell, or you're just compelled to do this for whatever reason. There's something you have to get out, because it's as you say, it's a lot of work. And you have to be willing to do a lot of work, and you have to be willing to potentially do a lot of work for a small audience, and that the audience is incredible, and that the audience they're gonna give you so much fulfillment, but you have to kind of be okay with only a small amount of people interacting with your project. If you're not gonna just blow up and be an influencer like that's not gonna happen. And so you need to kind of go into it with that mentality that I need to tell this story, and I need to tell this story, and that's what's motivating me. And then it's also, you've got to keep your project flexible. I mean, particularly if you're producing anything physical, that there are going to be delays. That what's going to happen is that your manufacturer is going to just call you and be like, I'm sorry, we had to shut the factory because there's a pandemic, so everything's going to be delayed by 2 weeks. Or just you're going to come home one day and there's going to be a note saying, we tried to deliver a package, and then it takes you another 5 days to get your package, and so everything's delayed. Right? And just there's going to be errors, things are going to go wrong. We've printed stuff with spelling mistakes, and then gone, oh my god, we printed stuff with spelling mistakes, we've got to print it again. And so you have to keep your project flexible, but also, again, if you want to interact with your audience, you have to kind of be flexible, and it depends on the experience you want to be creating. Whether it's a more on the rails experience or whether it's more of a game. But if you want to, the moment you invite the audience to participate, they will immediately derail your experience. They will do things you don't expect them to do, and you're going to have to be fluid enough to react to that. And certainly anyone that if you are compelled, if you do have a story that you need to tell, please talk to me. I'm always on Discord. I'm usually in the kind of vehement server or r/arg, or you can find me. I'm about, and yeah, I'd love to talk.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that. I'm sure the audience members appreciate it. Very, very much for stopping by. I would like to say thank you to Ramsay for coming on to the show. Go show your appreciation by checking out Boomtown and pictures of Gwen wherever you are in the world. Whatever platform you're watching on, Anchor, YouTube, Spotify, etc., make sure you're following the channel, specifically YouTube, where I upload the majority of my content. Make sure to follow me on all associated platforms for regular updates on what's coming. If you ever want to request a guest, a specific topic, or want to ask a question, shoot me an email at ag3ntidaho@gmail.com. Once again, ag3ntidaho, agentidaho@gmail.com. Shoot me an email and tell me what you'd like to see. Thanks again for tuning in. Remember to look behind you, and take care.